Hello and welcome to my channel. In this class, we will try to I shall try to explain the usage of var, let and constant in the JavaScript. So in short, we call JavaScript as JS. So var, let and const are very important keywords in JavaScript because it lets if we try to understand the JavaScript in very start, these are the very basic things var, let and const that must be understood before we start the concepts of JavaScript in the advanced. So here I will try to explain these words and their usage, these keywords var, let and const, and how they differ from each other from in the very core of them. So I shall try to present the scenarios and the examples where I can make you understand the key differences between the usage of var, let and const. So let's start. We shall try to the major conflict or the confusion occurs between the var and let, and the usage of let and const is almost same. There is a very minute difference, or there is a very small difference between let and const, because let and const were introduced together, and just because const is cannot be reassigned the value, but let variable can be assigned another value. Const doesn't let us reassign any value to the variable defined by using const keyword. So here I shall give examples where all things will be clear. So let's start. The let keyword was introduced in ES6, stands for ECMAScript 6, which was introduced in 2015. ECMAScript 6, I will briefly introduce ECMAScript 6 here as well, and shall try to create another video where I shall describe and present all the concepts which were defined or presented or introduced in the ECMAScript 6. So ECMAScript 6 basically is a modern JavaScript. The concept we use today basically come from the concepts of advanced JavaScript, come from the ECMAScript 6, and ECMAScript 6 presents the clear scenario of JavaScript, and it pave a way for the JavaScript to make new things in the JavaScript or advanced things in the JavaScript. Before this, we didn't have the block scope, right? Before ECMAScript 6, we didn't have block scope. Rather, we had the function scope and global scope. So function scope, you should search out the concept of function scope and global scope. But now in the modern JavaScript or after ECMAScript 6, we have block scope and global scope. So I will explain both of these terms, block scope and global scope, and will try to clear the things. So let's move further. The variable declared with the let have block scope. You should understand and remember this point, that those variables which are defined by the let keyword have block scope. This is very important thing. Next, we have variables declared with let must be declared before use. So it is very important, or something that a programmer must remember is that they have to declare the variable of the let keyword with the let keyword before they are used. Before using, you must declare the variable. Next, we have variables declared with let cannot be redeclared in the same scope. If you try to redeclare the same value or the variable with the same name using let, it will not allow us to define, because in that particular scope that variable has already been defined. So the let keyword will not let us redeclare the value in the same scope. Here something that we must remember is same scope. We can define the variable with the same name in another scope, like if we define a separate block and we are redefining the variable with the same name. Now because the scope is different, will have different values. This is something we must understand, this is something we must remember. So now the block scope. Here I have defined what does block scope mean and when it was introduced. Before ECMAScript 6 or before 2015, when the ECMAScript 6 was introduced, JavaScript didn't have a block scope. As I already mentioned previously that block scope was introduced into JavaScript in ECMAScript 6, and before that we didn't have a block scope. JavaScript had global scope and function scope. I had already mentioned this and I told you earlier that before this ECMAScript 6 we had a global scope and function scope. Next, ECMAScript 6 introduced the two new JavaScript keywords let and const. Let and const were introduced in the ECMAScript 6. These two keywords provided block scope in JavaScript because these two words were defined or introduced in the ECMAScript 6. With these two words, now the block scope came into existence. So here I have defined an example where I have tried to clarify the things and make the concepts clear and more easy so that you can use them in your practical programming. So here variables declared inside a block cannot be accessed from outside the block. Okay, so here it says that if the variable like x is defined inside the a block, now this is a block, this is called a block. From this braces to this braces, it is a complete block. Now and the point says if the variable is defined using let inside a keyword, this, if I try to explain this line, this means that we have defined a variable and the name of the variable is x using keyword let and we have initialized it. And another thing that there are two things in when we try to declare or initialize a value. One thing is declaration, another thing is initialization. Declaration is when we don't assign the value to the variable, this is called declaration. And when we assign the value to our variable, this is called initialization. When because we are initializing the variable with some value, so this is called initialization. And here then we have consoled or printed the value of the x to our output. So if I try to execute my code, so the 2 will be printed. Here we have got the result, 2 is printed because we have console. Now the point actually says, now because the variable x is defined inside this scope, it cannot be accessed outside the block. So here we will try to access the x, it will not let us print this, x is this. Now it will throw an error for sure. Here we can see now x is not defined because the scope of the let is block scope, so it is not allowing us to get the value of x outside of it. All right, so we will re-execute it and we'll still see that 2 will be printed. Here we have result. Let's move further. So x cannot be used here outside of the block. Next we have global scope. Variables declares with the var always have global scope. Now this is very crucial and very important to understand that those variables which are defined using keyword var always have a global scope. Global scope, from the term global scope we can infer that the scope of that particular value will not be restricted to particular point of or particular part of the code. It can be used anywhere. We can access that particular variable anywhere in our code, so that is called global scope. Okay, let's proceed. Variables declared with the var keyword cannot have block scope. Previously, I tried to explain the block scope, that those variables which are defined using or declared and initialized using var and let and const or have a block scope. So here is the block and its scope is limited to that particular block. Next we have example of that. We shall try to comment this code and understand the usage of var. So here something that you must understand. Here the example will clarify everything. Now we have an example of var. Variable declared with a var inside a block can be accessed from outside the block. Okay, here we have defined a variable x. Okay, so variable x, fine, all right. So we shall try to differentiate variable inside the block and variable outside. X inside the block, x, all right, value will be printed, and we shall try to console it outside x, x outside the block. All right, so this shall give us the value of the x outside the block. Because the scope of the variable x using var is global, or simply if I make it more easy, that if we have defined this variable inside a block, it doesn't mean that it will be restricted to this particular block, similar to the example we have previously seen using let. So now the x value will also be defined here. It will not throw an error. Let's see by executing the code. So here we can see the value of the x is 2 inside the block, as well as, because this is what the global scope means. Global scope means is you can use the variable x anywhere, inside the block or outside the block, anywhere in the code. So the scope is not restricted to particular block. All right, so here I hope that the concept is clear to you. Next, let's proceed and make things more easy ahead. I have given more examples so that things are not confusing to you. So we shall comment this code out. So x can be used. So this was outside the block, cannot be redeclared. So if the value is x, we have given x value to the variables defined with let cannot be redeclared. So variables, okay, this is separate concept. Those variables which are defined using let cannot be redeclared. You cannot accidentally redeclare a value redeclare variable declared with let. With let you cannot do this. Okay, so here I have given an example. For example, we have defined a variable x and assigned John Doe. So John Doe we have already defined, and next we again define the variable x with the same name x and initialize it with the value of 0. Here it will throw an error for sure, because in the let it doesn't allow us to redeclare that particular variable. Here we can see it says syntax error, identifier x has already been declared, which means that it doesn't allow to redeclare the value. This is very important point to remember. Variable defined with var can be redeclared. Okay, on the contrast we can see that variables defined with the var, it means those variables which are defined using var can be redeclared. Here is the example Let's try to execute it. We have the same example and we have assigned the same value to the redeclared value as we have in the let. So here we have assigned John Doe a name and then reassigned value 0. Let's see what it returns. So it doesn't return anything, means it has not produced any error. So if we try to console the value of x, here we shall see that value will be 0. Okay, because the same variable is overwritten, the value of x is overwritten by this last value assigned to it. Oh, if what if we try to redeclare it and print Nasim to it. Let's see what it returns. Hopefully Nasim will be overwritten to other values. Okay, you can see here that Nasim is overwritten to all the other previous values. So it means that we will see the last value assigned to it. So since Nasim is the last value, so Nasim is printed inside the x, in the x value. Okay, let's move ahead. Redeclaring variable. Redeclaring a variable using the var keyword can impose problems. It is not a good strategy to redeclare a variable with the same name. So it is always preferred to declare a variable with the unique name, so that if the code goes longer, you can be able to differentiate the variable based on the given circumstance. I hope that you are clear with that. Redeclaring a variable inside a block will also redeclare a variable outside the block. So if you are using where we have assigned x is equals to 10 and inside the block we have assigned x is equal to 2. Okay, we have defined the same variable name. One is outside the scope, outside the block, other is inside the block. So here x is 2. It is very much constrained or the not allowed to use the same variable name in the same situation. As I previously mentioned, try to differentiate the variable based on the situation and their usage. Here, because this is defined outside the block, the variable will obviously be 10, because it is the x is assigned 10 value. Inside x we will get 2 value. What do you think will be the value of x outside the scope or outside the block? Here, stop this video here and think for a minute, so that you can get the concept more. Even if you are committing the mistake, it is not a big deal, because you are on a learning stage. Let me show you. So here the value of x is 2, because you might be expecting that the value of x would be 10 because this is outside the block, but in the memory the value is overwritten here. The value is overwritten on the x in the memory. So in the end we are getting 2 value. Here I have already written here x is 2. Alright, so I hope this is clear to you. Redeclaring a variable using let keyword can solve this problem. Redeclaring a variable inside a block will not redeclare a value outside the block. Why? When we use let, it doesn't declare the value inside the block, it actually differentiates. How? In the when we are using var, the variable is overwritten inside, even if it is redeclared inside the block. Like if we have defined x 10 here and here it is 2, and here again it becomes 2 because it is overwritten. But in case of let, things are little different. How? Let me show you. So we have defined a variable using let, same name, same name of the variable, and we have same variable name of variable. So what do you think, what will be the value here? Because we have already, I have already told you the scope of the let keyword is block scope. It means that this particular value defined here has nothing to do with the environment outside this block. Got it? So we will again see that this value will be printed here. Let me show you. Here we go. 10 is printed because this is the variable defined using let is block scope. Okay, let's comment this out, move further. So the const keyword was introduced in ES6, like let the const was also introduced in ECMAScript 6. Variables defined with const cannot be redeclared because this const and this const keyword means constant. That means it cannot be changed. Like we have value of the pi, here I have given example. So we cannot change value of the change. Pi is universal constant, it is same everywhere, so we are not supposed to change this. Variable defined with const cannot be reassigned. We cannot reassign a value to the const variables. Variable defined with const have block scope. Like similarly, like let variables have block scope, the const variables also have block scope. So here is the example. If we try to change the value of here, how I'm showing you, this will throw an error. How this is throwing an error? So we can see that. Okay, we will try to because we have defined this word variable pi and assigned the value, and here we have again assigned different value because this value is different from this one, so it will throw error for sure. Here you see this will give an error, assignment to constant variable. So we cannot reassign value to the variable defined using const. So make sure all those values which you don't want to change later on in the program should be defined by the const variable. Otherwise it is preferred to use let instead of const if you are changing the value of this particular variable anywhere in your code. So we will comment this out. All right, so this was all about today's class. Hopefully things are clear to you. If not, let me know in the comment section. Thank you.